afternoon. My name is Dominique Pettiford, and I'm a graduating speech language pathology major. My research proposal was written on the effects that domestic violence has on children. So I once read a quote where it said, "Children exposed to violence in their family show the same brain activity as soldiers who have gone to combat." So that's something for you to think about. My research question had two parts. The first part was, what are some effects that domestic violence has on children? And the second part was, are children who experience violence in the home more prone to becoming violent? So, domestic violence. Domestic violence is defined as the pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power over another. There are 5 types of domestic violence. The first one will be physical, the second is sexual, the third is emotional, the fourth is economic, and the fifth is psychological. So for the first one, the physical side will be physically placing your hands on someone. The second will be sexually abusing someone, meaning making them have sex with you or doing sexually explicit things that they did not want to do. The third would be emotional, which is just speaking down to them and having a sort of control over them to where they believe that people don't love them or they don't love themselves enough or more than you do. The fourth would be economic, which means that there's 2 sides of that. One side could be they don't work at all and you pay the bills so you make them feel bad about that. Or the other side could be that they work and they give you all their money. And I would think about that kind of like a pimp and a prostitute, where he would take all her money and she would be the one doing all the work. And lastly, psychological. That probably has the longest effect on children and those who are victimized by domestic violence, because that stays in your brain longest and that makes you think longer, and people wake up with night terrors and things like that. So the significance of the study is this. Women from ages 18 to 34, which is my age, are at the greatest risk of becoming victims of domestic violence. 15.5 million children live in households where domestic violence occurs. 5 million children witness domestic violence each year in the United States of America. And living with domestic violence significantly alters a child's DNA, aging them prematurely 7 to 10 years of age. So you can have a 3-year-old who may have a younger sibling who's 1 year old. And if they witness domestic violence, that 3-year-old would begin on taking on the role that maybe an 8-year-old would, just because they're trying to protect their younger siblings or anything like that. So, how are children exposed to domestic violence? Hearing threats, physical harm, being hit or threatened while they're in their mother's arm, actually seeing their father, and I say father because men are 95% more likely to commit domestic violence and be the predators of that. Being denied care because the mother is injured or depressed. Also, they see the aftermath of the violent incident, so they see how their mother and their father communicate with one another, or loved ones communicate. And then another one would be experiencing a loss of a parent due to murder or suicide. Sometimes people go to that extreme, and nobody thinks about how their children are affected in that. So the purpose of my study is to investigate domestic violence and the correlation of effects and outcomes of children who do witness this violence. Okay, so I did a couple literature reviews. The one that I really liked was the first literature review by the Liam study. So it analyzed the effects of child abuse and domestic violence exposure in childhood of adolescents suppressing and expressing behaviors. It took 457 youths addressing outcomes of family violence and strengths in individuals and families. So it took 457 youth from different racial backgrounds. Excuse me. And what it did was, it showed that where they were seeing violence, the kind of behaviors that they would do. A lot of things came into play, from ADHD, where they couldn't keep their mind focused on one thing long enough. Other things were like learning disabilities, where the child would be able to be socially apt, but when it came to learning, something was on their brain, I would believe, that just did not allow for them to pick up and to comprehend a lot of things that normal children at whatever age that they were at would do. Another thing would be that I found really interesting was they would be very, very smart but have social issues. So their pragmatic skills, because I'm a speech pathology major, that would be the social side of things. So even children who have autism, a child who has special needs, or a child that is just typically developing, but they have they see abuse at home, they sometimes regress and they become younger, even though it said that some do become older. In this study, it showed a lot would become a little bit younger. So the results showed that child abuse, domestic violence, are both of them. In combination, it would increase the child's risk of internalizing and externalizing certain behaviors, whether it be not speaking, speaking too much, being very, very quiet, or acting out with anger and things like that because they weren't able to control their environment at home. There were some noticeable differences in the prediction of outcomes for the children. For one, it was compared to those of single exposure. So things like those who experience both child abuse and domestic violence were at a greater risk of, one, becoming violent, but also, two, having certain feelings and certain behaviors that were unlike those who just experienced maybe child abuse but didn't experience domestic violence, or vice versa. The analysis showed that the effects of exposure on girls and boys were statistically different. And with that, what I found interesting was that the girls, they were able to they didn't regress as much as the boys, but they didn't act out as much in the behavior part. And I thought that was interesting because sometimes boys, we believe that males are more logical, but sometimes when a male would see his father abusing his mother, he thought that that was an okay behavior. He knew it was wrong, but he thought that, well, because my father did that and that's all that I saw, that's what I would want to, that's all I know, so that's what I'm going to do. So the methodology that I want to use for my research, it would be a meta-analysis of combining quantitative and qualitative research data. So for the qualitative approach, I would do explanatory, which would mean that I would really want to, how I would do it, I'm going to go in and get different interviews, different stories, and different questionnaires from the adults that I choose and the children that I choose, and then the administrators and things like that in the school systems and psychologists and things, just to see what their thoughts were and what they witnessed. And I would take qualitative data on that. So it would be something where once I got the interviews, I would take whatever they said, and I would measure it up against each other and see what percentage of students that they saw were either behaving or behaving badly, or those who were behaving in like a typical child should or would. The data will consist of interviews, crime statistics, case studies, and journal articles with critical analysis, explanatory, and exploratory research. The target population, so we all call domestic violence wife beating, and it wasn't a crime until wasn't illegal until 1920, and then even then not until 1970 did the judicial system began treating it as a serious crime, because they thought that you were your husband's property. So whether he wanted to sleep with you at that point or whether he wanted to hit on you, it wasn't the business, it wasn't a public issue. My target population is, I wanted to take the top three races. So that would be African Americans, Caucasians, and Hispanics or Latinos. African American, the women, they do comprise of the largest group who are either sexually or physically abused. And then after that, it will be Hispanics, and Hispanic men seem to be arrested more, although African American women seem to call the cops more. So I'll take 30 participants, which will be seven adolescents, and then 3 adults of each race. So 7 African American children and 3 African American adults who have gone through the process of being witnesses of childhood domestic violence. Okay, so my research design and procedure, I'm really interested in doing this because in my community I do see a lot of people who, think that because they're hit on, it's okay. That's, boys will be boys, that famous quote that we all know. And rape culture is a big thing. I have a sister going to college, and then I see a lot of my friends who deal with the fact that, oh, I have to cover up because the man is this way. And it kind of correlates with domestic violence. So I wanted to interview the non-adult participants, and I actually am going to make up 3 different questionnaires so that so I can get different aspects from all 3 individuals. So from one, I'm going to do one of the white, one of the African American, one of the Latino, and then I'm going to do one again, just so that I can see maybe if I ask different questions how the answers would be, and these would be more so open-ended than closed-ended like I did for my survey. And then for the 21 students, I want to review their records from the school system and review any police reports to see if they are able to, I guess, answer certain feelings that they have and how they feel about violence on not only their parents against each other, but also outside, so whether it's their friends or peers or anything like that. And I want them to fill out anonymous surveys and questionnaires because I know that they already feel like they have to protect their family. That's the biggest thing that children feel. And I don't want them to feel as though we're judging them or anything like that. And then lastly, I want to, like the children who are younger and verbally inept, I would like to record them and their interactions with their caregivers or interactions with their teachers and other professionals that they've been around that they kind of know, but still may be kind of reserved about because of the violence that they witness or may witness at home. Interviews and observations will be tape recorded and videoed for some in intervals of 15 minutes. I think that 15 minutes gives enough time to understand and know, okay, this is what the child should be doing, this is what he isn't doing, and things like that from my prior knowledge. The interviews, like I stated earlier, will be informal, open-ended, and conversation-like. So I want them to go in there feeling comfortable so that I can get the true nature of how they act and how they respond to certain situations. So for my survey in class, I had like probably 5 questions. All of them, it was closed-ended. I had to give them options so they didn't allow for any elaboration, so it didn't deviate from the statistics that I was trying to see. I wanted to give something to where I believe that a lot of times closed-ended surveys and questionnaires are able to get more statistical data. Not that would be biased, it would be really unbiased, but that doesn't go against. If I had them do open-ended questions, I can see so many things because people try to explain in those situations and they try to give excuses and things like that. Excuse me. So I do believe that doing the closed-ended questionnaires that I did would really help. The way that I got those questions, I kind of thought of them myself because, like I said, I'm really into young women who are going off to college, number one, young women who are just trying to work and do what they're supposed to and feeling as though they're not safe because, or that they have to stay in a relationship with a man because he claims that he loves them and he claims that he cares for them. But I also want to show that some thoughts in my head were like, is domestic violence okay for you? How do you feel about it? And then another reason why I asked some of the questions that I did was because a lot of times people they only see physical and sexual abuse as domestic violence and not economic, emotional, or physiological. So I thought that asking those questions would convey some thought processes for these, for the people not only in my class, but the other people that I interviewed and gave, will give the research or the questionnaires too. So here's some of my references, and I'm just really looking forward to doing this data because it seems that while we're learning more about domestic violence and rape culture, as I keep saying, because the two go hand in hand sometimes, I think that it's still kind of a taboo subject and people don't want to speak on it. And I'm really hopeful that I can get some data out here and some research statistics out here that kind of help those and target not only those in college and going to college, but also women who have witnessed abuse and men who have witnessed abuse but didn't know what kind of abuse that it was. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it.